What? Yeah. Okay. So I think we can begin our lecture. Okay, I think we have been discussing about the central teaching of the Buddha, which is causality or conditionality, and the theory of dependent origination, if you remember. So we'll try to complete our discussion as soon as possible on this topic. I'll try to cover some of the important ideas and expressions that are central to this discussion of conditionality and some of these familiar concepts, popular concepts, before moving towards the discussion of the community or Sangha, which is also a very important topic of discussion, because after the Buddha's attainment of enlightenment, when he wanted to share his knowledge for the benefit of the people, he had to establish a kind of communities four types of communities are recognized: the community of monks, the community of nuns, the community of male lay follower, and the community of female lay follower. So we have been discussing that the Buddha, after his attainment of awakening, began his teaching career with these two suttas, basically the Dhammacakka Sutta and the Anatalakkhana Sutta, and saying that these two suttas in a way represent the the most important messages that the Buddha came up with. And we can say that later on he in fact elaborated on these two suttas, basically. Is it because of internet? Internet seems to be a bit unstable, I guess. It is cloudy here. It has been raining in the morning. I hope now it is okay. Can you all hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I was saying that these two suttas are very, very important. You have, of course, different other suttas of different length, discussing a lot of different topics. But if you really look at these two suttas, you have all these important concepts appearing in these two suttas. And we can really understand it from the perspective that when he came up with these ideas, he was going to share his ideas for the first time to his students, or rather friends, actually, because they have been continuing the practice together until when the Buddha, the Siddhartha, ascetic Siddhartha, got separated from these 5 friends, right? So we have to keep in mind that when he started his teaching career, when he was thinking of his potential audience, he thought of his two teachers who then passed away, and then he thought of this. Yes, because okay, the reason is very obvious, because he himself has been an ascetic for a long period of time, striving towards the attainment of awakening, and then he knows that these friends have been trying to achieve the same, attainment. So there was a kind of similar effort and goal in all of them, right? So, and then when he tried with his first sutta, one of the monks, Kondanya, attained Dhammachakku, which is defined as the attainment of Sotapatti, later on, vision of truth. And this is expressed in terms of a very simple formula of conditionality. You can say that it appears in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. So that was his understanding basically, and it means that whatever that comes to exist must cease. So when this sentence was uttered by Kundanya, the Buddha then affirmed that Kundanya understood the reality of nature, the truth, and he was declared to be, someone who has attained this Dhammachakku. And then later on, the Buddha delivered his second sutta, after which it says that all five friends attained arahanthood, Sotapanna, but they all became arahant. And at that time, there were just 6 arahants, including the Buddha, in the world. And then later on, he moved forward to teach his teaching to other people. So this is the teaching that we are discussing now. And I mentioned that you can find these formulas appearing in the Udana, especially in the first 3 suttas, in both order, Anuloma and Patiloma. So Anuloma represent direct order, that is Avijja Paccaya Sankara, Sankara Paccaya Vijnana, until how the entire mass of suffering come to exist. Voice is cutting. It's probably because of the internet or what? Is it? What about others? Are you also having problem hearing my voice? I see. What could be the reason? Internet seems to be stable here. Maybe need to call, for example, Rahul. He should know the exact line. It's another kind of shame appearing here. Wow, so most of the people are having difficulties. This is not so good. Okay. Not sure if it is because of internet or because of sound system. Yeah. What about now? Are you hearing my voice clearly now? Yes, I think there is problem with internet connection. Some of the people cannot hear my voice clearly. So I'm using this line now. So maybe I need to change to another line. This one. But, I do not know the password of this. I'm not sure which one is more stable. This one. Okay. Okay, so until we change to another line for the internet connection, I think we have to stick to this one. Yeah. Okay, so I have been saying that you can find this formula appearing in the Udana, in these three suttas of the Udana, where you have this formula in Anuloma order and Patiloma order. So the main theory says, iti imasming sati idang hoti, imas upada idang uppajjati, imasming asati idang nahoti, imas niroda idang nirucchati. So that is the theory that you can find in this sutta. And then as an example, these 12 links of Paticca Samuppada is explained in both order, right? So there is something that I have pointed out, and I wanted you to have an understanding of it. That is the relationship between cause and effect. It is not to be understood in terms of, you know, it's okay. Okay, let me try to change the line for the time being. Connect to this one. So I have just connected to a different line. I hope you all can hear my voice clearly now. Okay, so coming back to the discussion, it should not be understood, the theory should not be understood as from A arises B, rather it should be understood as when A is present, B comes to be. So there is a kind of relationship between the causes and effects, but at the same time, we have to keep in mind that nothing of the effect is present in the cause, and nothing from the cause really transmits to the result. So the relationship is explained in terms of neither this nor that. And the example that is provided to us, the example of milk. the change of milk into butter, clarified butter, and so on. Okay, so every moment things are changing. That is the idea. And when there is a discussion of momentary change from one moment to the next moment, the relationship is neither the same nor different. Because when you accept the idea of sameness, then you are attached to the idea of the existence, which is denied. And when you think of it in terms of complete separateness, then this represents the idea of separateness, or in a way extinction, or even abrupt causality. So anything can come from anything else. So that is the idea. Now we also came to discuss this, that this theory of dependent origination is not so easy to understand, and the Buddha himself realized it. And I'm not sure if you have really gone through these suttas. In those 3 suttas, it is mentioned that as soon as the Buddha attained enlightenment, he was in the meditation for about 1 week, reflecting on this theory of dependent origination. And after getting up from his meditation, in the first watch of the night, he was thinking of this dependent origination in Anuloma order, and then in the middle watch of the night in Patiloma order, and in the last watch of the night, he was reflecting on this idea of Paticcasamuppada in both order. And it says that he was paying well-reasoned attention, sadhukang manasikasi. So he was paying well-reasoned attention. So we have to keep some of this in mind, that we are here talking about someone who has attained enlightenment, who has been in the meditation immediately after becoming a Buddha for 1 week continuously without getting up, and reflecting on this understanding of conditionality or causality. And then he was coming up with this theory, and he himself is saying that it is Gambiro Tuddha Sodurano Bodho Santo Panitu Ataka Vacharo Nipuno Pandita Vedani. So this is something that is very, very deep, subtle. So if we try to understand it conceptually, quickly, it would not be possible. We have to give ourselves some time so that we can be slowly familiar with the ideas. And of course, it is a matter of experience. On the conceptual level, this is the term that you have to look at. It is said to be Ataka-vacharu. It should not be discussed or understood just merely using logic or reasoning. Okay, it is something that is beyond logic. But of course, you can make use of language and logic to have some kind of familiarity and understanding. It is Nipuno Pandita Vedani. It is very subtle, and it should be realized and understood by Pandita, wise person. Okay, so in the Buddhist term, especially in the Theravada tradition, a Pandita is defined in terms of someone being freed from negative psychological aspects, particularly Lobha, Dosa, and Moha. Right? So there are degrees of these psychological qualities, negative psychological qualities. They are termed as akusala dhamma as opposed to kusala dhamma. So there could be your raga or lobha could be very, very strong. It could be, not so strong. So it depends on your understanding and practice of the dhamma. So the more you become free from this negative psychological aspects, your vision would be more clear to the understanding of Dhamma. So that is what is intended here. And a Pandita is someone who is freed from all these negative psychological qualities. We have also discussed this conversation between the Buddha and Ananda, and this is very, very significant because Ananda has been a constant companion of the Buddha for especially last 25 years, serving the Buddha. So when Ananda is saying that, it is a very amazing teaching and it is very clear to me, Buddha want him saying that do not think that it is so easily understood. You have to reflect on it more. You have to think twice. And we see the Buddha himself is doing that. Okay, then with regard to the scope of dependent origination, our focus was to understand this theory of dependent origination specifically in relation to our own existence, that is physicality and mentality, our own being, right? So it should be understood in terms of loka and in terms of sabba, and how loka is defined in the Theravada tradition. Loka is defined to be the six sense organs, six sense objects, and the six sense consciousness, and the things cognizable by the six sense consciousness. So here is a chart. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. These are six indriyas. Visible object, sound, smell, taste, touch, thoughts. These are corresponding objects for each indriya. And then you have six types of consciousness: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. And then you have things cognizable by eye consciousness, things cognizable by ear consciousness, things cognizable by nose consciousness, things cognizable by tongue consciousness, things cognizable by body consciousness, things cognizable by mind consciousness. So this is the world that is referring to, and the concept of dependent origination particularly should be understood in relation to this. These represent our own being, own existence, and how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive everything else. And what about Sabba? It is the same actually. The Sabba also should be understood in relation to this. And then we came to this discussion of 12 links formula of dependent origination. Avidya paccaya sankara, sankara paccaya vijnana, vijnana paccaya nama rupam, nama rupa paccaya salayatana, salayatana paccaya phasso, phassa paccaya vedana, vedana paccaya tanha, tanha paccaya upadana, upadana paccaya bhavo, bhava paccaya jati, jati paccaya jara maranam, soka parideva, dukkha domanassa upayasa, sambhavanti, eva metassa kevalassa, dukkha khandassa samudayo hoti. So these 12 links of a dependent origination represent a complete, example of how, especially, beings come to exist, and how the entire mass of suffering comes to exist. The focus is on the, arising of suffering. That is the central point. And I think it is very, very clear, even if you look at the Four Noble Truths, it is because there is suffering, and suffering is not without cause. So you have to remove the cause if you really want to be free from suffering. So that is the idea. You would find other formulas mentioning in different suttas. There could be found 9 links formula, whereas probably avijja is not mentioned as a beginning point. Probably, tanha is mentioned as a beginning point and so on. So these are different ways and approaches to explain the same thing. That is how the entire mass of suffering, comes to be, and how one should really deal with this suffering. So this is the Anuloma order. And then in the Patiloma order, you would find Avijjaya Tueva Asesa Viraga Nirodha Sankara Nirodha. So when there is no Avijja, now here this Avijja is explained together with Asesa Viraga Nirodha. So it is not just ignorance, it is complete cessation of ignorance and raga. There is the complete cessation of karmic formation. Sankara Nirodha, Vijnana Nirodha, Vijnana Nirodha, Namarupa Nirodha, Namarupa Nirodha, Salayatana Nirodha, Salayatana Nirodha, Phassa Nirodha, Phassa Nirodha, Vedana Nirodha, Vedana Nirodha, Tanha Nirodha, Tanha Nirodha, Upadana Nirodha, Upadana Nirodha, Bhava Nirodha, Bhava Nirodha, Jati Nirodha, Jati Nirodha, Jara Maranam, Soka Parideva, Dukkha Domanasa Upayasa Niruchanti. Evam Metassa Kevalasa, Dukkha Kandasa, Nirodho Hoti. So this is the Patiloma order. So when it says reverse order, it is not from the end to the beginning. So in the Anuloma order, we find when there is avijja, there is sankara. When there is sankara, there is vijnana. That is the direct order. In the reverse order, it does not say when there is no jara marana, there is no jati. Rather, it says when there is no avijja, there is no sankara. And these 12 links, according to the traditional explanation, should be understood in terms of 3 lifetimes: past, present, and future. So there is an explanation here. It says the cycle of dependent origination, as explained above, is usually called the wheel of becoming or the wheel of rebirth, and it covers 3 distinct lifetimes. In that, ignorance and volitional formations comprise 1 lifespan, consciousness to becoming comprise another lifespan, and birth and aging and death, along with sorrow, lamentation, etc., comprise a 3rd lifespan. By determining the middle interval, consciousness to becoming as the present life, the 3 stages containing 12 factors can be connected to 3 periods of time: past life, present life, and future life. In these 3 life divisions, the present life is considered the principal period of time. The relationship of the past to the present is only viewed in the light of causal factors. The results manifesting in the present are traced back to the causes in the past. So past causes contributing to present results. Similarly, the view of the future pertains to results. Present causes are linked to future results. Therefore, only the present contains both results and causes. This relationship of cause and effect can be depicted as 4 stages. But if you look at these 12 factors, now at this very moment, all the beings who are not enlightened are endowed with avijja. All beings are possessing avijja, right? And sankara and vijnana and everything. So when it explains in terms of 3 lifetimes, one should understand it not in the sense that in the past life only the avijja and sankara have been functioning. In the present life, the factors from vijnana until bhava have been functioning, and in the future life, jati, jara, marana, and so on have been functioning. It should not be understood in that way. Rather, what is implied is that when there is the perishing moment of the past life, and there is relinking consciousness, and the first moment of the present life, what is functioning as cause for this present life? So what is functioning as cause for the arising of the next moment, subsequent moment in the present life? In the Patisandhi Vijnana, it is said to be avijja and sankara. So there is karmic formations that is coming along with vijnana, and then you have this present life, and this is so when you come up to bhava, that is a desire of becoming, that lead you to another rebirth, jati. So this is how it should be understood. But of course, there is another opinion by some of the modern scholars like Ajahn Buddhadasa of Thailand. He was a renowned scholar who have been studying and writing on this theory of dependent origination. And he came up with the idea that it should be understood to function in every moment. So he's trying to explain it in terms of 3 moments, past, present, and future moments, rather than accepting the explanation provided by traditional scholars or commentators, rather, because this idea have been discussed by commentators like Acharya Buddhaghosa and so on, in terms of 3 lifetimes. So this Ajahn Buddhadasa and some of the other contemporary scholars have been saying that should be understood in terms of 3 consecutive moments. So I think you can try to understand it in terms of 3 consecutive moments. That is also possible, but you cannot really neglect the idea of 3 lifetimes, because that is further explained in the Abhidhamma literature particularly. If you look at this, for example, this represents the stream of consciousness, stream of bhavanga, and how a chitta functions in a particular moment. Now, what is the significance of this number 17? So there is a distinction made in the traditional Abhidhamma, Theravada Abhidhamma literature, that the mind moment is different from matter moment. First of all, everyone agrees that everything is changing momentarily. So this momentary change is accepted by all. But how fast the mind changes, how fast the matter changes is different. So it says that the mind changes, mind moments change 17 times faster than the matter moment. So this is the explanation that can be found in the Theravada Abhidhamma. Now, this phase here represents a stream of bhavanga. So is this, and in between there is this 17 moments: past bhavanga, vibrating bhavanga, arrest bhavanga, I door adverting, I consciousness, receiving, investigating, determining, and then you have 7 javana moments: registering, registration, and then stream of consciousness. So what it means is that there is this bhavanga, which is called a stream of consciousness, that is going on in a momentary succession. When it is active, you have this, it takes this 17 shana, 17 aspect of a moment. When you define a particular moment to be active, okay, so before you determine an object, for example, here there is an example of I consciousness, okay, so it could be applied to all the other types of consciousness. As soon as you see something, your eyes see something, it does not immediately recognize or register what it is. It takes these 7 javana moments before the registration, before you can really say that this is, red or orange or yellow and so on. Okay. Yes. Now this explanation is from Theravada Abhidhamma. In other schools, for example, in the Sarvastivada Abhidhamma, in Yogacara, so they have different theories. In Yogacara particularly, they have this idea of 3 layers of consciousness. So they come up with this active consciousness, which is connected to 5 indriyas: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. And then you have a mind consciousness, manas vijnana, which is said to be a deeper level of consciousness. And then still the deepest level of consciousness, which is termed as unconscious state of mind, is considered as alaya vijnana, storehouse consciousness. So all the sankaras and everything is present there. It is the seat of anger, the seat of greed, the seat of ignorance, jealousy, or all the negative and positive seats. Everything is there. But when your indriyas come in contact with external objects, then depending on the interaction between the indriyas and objects, a particular type of states become active. So all these states are present, and they are called sankaras, karmic forces. And these are the seeds. They have been transmitting or continuing to exist throughout different lifetimes. So the sankaras and avijjas are grouped to belong to past existence. Okay, and in the present existence, from vijnana until bhava, because when somebody is taking a new life, it is this patisandhi vijnana or relinking consciousness that is first appearing. And then one is passing away, there is a desire of becoming or even non-becoming. And when one is born, together with one's existence, there is jara, marana, and all kinds of suffering. Okay, now
So teacher,
this theory
excuse me.
is particularly explained in relation to Four Noble Truths. I have simply mentioned previously in a passing order. Let's look at this short passage. It says, idang dukkhang arya satchanti me bhikkave. Idang dukkha samudayang arya satchanti me bhikkave. Idang dukkha nirodhang arya satchanti me bhikkave. Idang dukkha nirodha gamini patipada. In meditation, can we experience those 17 mind movements? It is possible. I think it is possible to experience these 17 mind movements, samatha or vipassana. Now, how is it possible? Because we find these explanations appearing in the Abhidhamma literature, basically. And as far as our understanding goes, this Abhidhamma literature came to exist later. It is a later collection, later than the Sutta collection and Vinaya collection, but based on the teachings within the previous two collections. And these teachings in the Abhidhamma have been, brought forth by the meditation masters. Once you look at the explanation of the teachings in the Abhidhamma, it should be very, very clear, because it is very much focused on meditative experience. What we find to be Nama Rupa, or 5 aggregates, or 6 ayatanas, 12 dhatus, 12 ayatanas and 18 dhatus in the suttas, in different suttas, have been further classified in the Abhidhamma in terms of chittas, different number of chittas, cetasikas, rupas, and including nibbana. So if one does not really experience the 17 mind movements in one's meditation, one cannot come up with this idea of 17 mind movements, because you can then have this question of why not 15, 16, or 18? Why not just 5? Right? So it is possible that when one is in meditation, one should be able to experience these 17 mind movements. Is it in samatha or vipassana? I'm not exactly sure. I think it could be even in samatha as well, as long as we talk of this jhanic experiences and so on, because that represent very, very deep level of concentration. And while on the one hand, to have vipassana to be developed in vipassana meditation, or to practice vipassana meditation, you do not necessarily have to be established in jhanas, but there is a certain level of concentration that should be developed. And what you do in the vipassana is that you normally try to understand I can say just nama rupa, your own existence, mind moments, and your physicality in terms of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So that is the purpose of vipassana. You see things as they are, how they appear, how they change without judging until you really truly understand and really develop this awareness of the truth. So yes, I think it is possible in both samatha and vipassana.
Thank you, teacher.
Yeah. So yes, okay. Coming back to this discussion of Four Noble Truths. This statement is from Mahavagga. Siddha is saying, Idang dukkhang, dukkha samudayang, dukkha nirodhang, nirodhagamini, dukkha nirodhagamini patipada arya satchantime, bhikkhave, pubbe ananusutesu dhammesu, chakkung udapadi, jnanang udapadi, panya udapadi, vijja udapadi, aloko udapadi. Now, again, this you can find in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta when the Buddha came up with this idea of Four Noble Truths, and he expressed this phrase particularly, Pubbe ananusutesu, unheard before, previously unheard, Dhammesu chakkung udapadi. So vision arose with regard to things that were unheard before. Jnanang udapadi, knowledge arose with regard to this. Panya udapadi, wisdom arose. Vijja udapadi, how do you say? One of the translation provided is gnosis, or actually represent knowledge again. Aloko udapadi, light arose. So in a way, vision, knowledge, wisdom, or gnosis, or even light, all can be understood as synonyms, right? So then the question is why there is a need of having all these different words, right? And then we can, I think, look at this udana again, and we have this understanding that I have to recall this story again. After his attainment of awakening, he has been spending 1 week of deep meditation continuously without moving, without getting up. And at the end of that, he's reflecting on this Paticca Samuppada, or the theory of causality in Anuloma and Patiloma order. So when it says Pubbe ananusutesu dhammesu chakkung udapadi until aloko udapadi, it suggests that he discovered something that was not realized by anyone else before, at least in the vicinity that where the Buddha was dwelling, Buddha was familiar with, right? And then it seems to suggest that his understanding was full and complete. It is not partial understanding. That is what we see when he was reflecting on the theory in Anuloma and Patiloma order before he is deciding to teach. Okay, so I think to show that this is mentioned in this particular way, that with regard to these Four Noble Truths, vision, knowledge, wisdom, gnosis, and light arose in the Buddha. So it represents a complete and all-rounding, full understanding of these four truths. And then the Buddha says, it is through not understanding, not realizing four things that I, disciples, as well as you, had to wander so long through this round of rebirths. As long as the absolutely true knowledge and insight as regards these four noble truths was not quite clear in me, so long was I not sure that I had won that supreme enlightenment which is unsurpassed in all the world with its heavenly beings, evil spirits and gods, amongst all the hosts of ascetics and priests, heavenly beings and men. It is very, very clear. He was referring to this, his understanding of the Four Noble Truths. And the first truth is dukkha. And this is how dukkha is defined. Jatipi dukkha, jarapi dukkha, vyadipi dukkha, maranampi dukkha. Apiyehi sampayogo dukkha, piyehi vipayogo dukkha, yampichang na labati tampi dukkhang, sankitena panchupadana kanda dukkha. So this is the first truth. And this is the definition of dukkha that you can find in the Dhammacakka Sutta and also in Mahavaka. Now, birth itself is defined as dukkha because it is because of birth that all other kinds of dukkhas come to exist. If one is not born, there is no fear of dying. There is no fear of getting sick. There is no fear of becoming old. Right? So that is in the first category. In the second category, it says apiyehi sampayoga dukkha. When you associate with beings or things that you do not like, that is suffering. Piyehi vipayoga dukkha. When someone or something close to you is separated, there is suffering. Yam pichang na labati tampi dukkham. If you do not get what you wish, that is suffering. Sankitena panchupadana kanda dukkha. In brief, the attachment, the clinging to five aggregates is suffering. And this should be understood in terms of one's clinging to self idea. And there are a lot of discussions in different suttas with regard to how people come to, have this grasping of self. Now, when we talk about Panchakanda, Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana, we need to keep in mind that this is an early classification or analysis of a being that we can find in suttas. So this is just a method of understanding and explaining a being. This was an approach taken by the Buddha and his disciples, right? And the grasping of self is said to come to exist when someone is attached to these five aggregates or any of the five aggregates as self. There is a famous example of Sati, the monk who, after hearing the teaching of the Buddha and so on, did not really understand the teaching properly, and he came up with the idea that what the Buddha is saying is that everything is impermanent except the vijnana. It is the vijnana that is there, that is present, and that continues to exist. And when it was reported to the Buddha blamed him in the community, in front of the community of Sangha, and he said that this is not what I teach. You did not really understand my teaching, so you need to pay more attention. So even the vijnana is impermanent. So it is only, that is why you do not have a particular type of vijnana. You have chakku vijnana, sota vijnana, and different types of vijnana. Because when there are sufficient causes and conditions present, then only a particular type of vijnana come to exist. So this is the explanation of different aggregates, how form is understood or explained in Buddhist text. And in the Abhidhamma, you have these 28 aspects of form, 4 primary elements and 24 corporeality derived from them, secondary elements. The 4 primary elements are earth, water, fire, and air. Patavi, Apo, Tejo, and Vayu. What is earth element? The solid element of one's own or external. And what is this one's own solid element referring to? It refers to whatever in one's own person or body there exists of karmically acquired hardness, firmness, such as the hairs of head and body, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, stomach, bowels, mesentery, excrement, and so on. This is called one's own solid element. Fluid and heat. You can find this being mentioned in different suttas. I think we do not have to go through every word. And wind. Okay, so then the explanation provided is that this aggregates, these different aggregates, when come together, they form a being. A being comes to be. So it is just like a hut. So that is what it says. Just as one calls hut the confined space which comes to be by means of wood and rushes, reeds and clay, even so we call body the confined space that comes to be by means of bones and sinews, flesh and skin. The other 4 aggregates, feeling, perception, volitions, and consciousness. There are 3 kinds of feelings explained. Pleasant feeling, unpleasant feeling, neither pleasant nor unpleasant, that is indifferent feeling. 6 classes of perception connected to 6 types of objects: perception of forms, perception of sounds, perception of odors or smell, perception of taste, bodily impressions, and perception of mental objects. Similarly, 6 classes of formations were explained: will directed to forms, to sounds, to odors, tastes, bodily impressions, and to mental objects. And we have already discussed 6 classes of consciousness connected to 6 Indriyas. Yes. Any questions so far? If not, let us continue with the lecture. So this is the process that you can find to be mentioned in the Sutta literature. Dependent origination of consciousness and the perceptual process. This you can find in the Madhupindika Sutta. Yeah, Madhupindika Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya. Yes, it is present in the Majjhima Nikaya. Chakkuncha avoso paticca rupecha uppajjati chakku vijnanam tinnang sangati passo hasapachaya vedana yang vedeti tang sanjanati yang sanjanati tang vitakketi yang vitakketi tang papancheti yang papancheti tato nidanang purisam papancha sanya sankha samuda charanti atitana gata pachuppannesu chakku vinyayesu rupesu. Sotansa avuso paticca saddesa uppajjanti sota vinyanam tinnang sangati passo. And you can have the same formula with regard to all the other sense organs. Now what it says, if you remember earlier, I have shown you this process of bhavanga chitta as it is explained in the Abhidhamma literature, how a mind moment functions. That is very, very elaborated explanation. This can be regarded as a primary explanation that is provided in the sutta literature. Now what it says is that chakkuncha avuso paticca rupecha uppajjate chakku vijnanam. So here the discussion is on the chakku vijnana first. How eye consciousness arise. It says it comes to be when eye and form come together. So when there is a contact between eye and form, and then there is eye consciousness. Tinnang sangati passo. When these three come together, that is called contact. Phassa pachaya vedana. When there is contact, there is feelings. Yang vedeti tang sanjanati. When what one feels, one perceives. So from feelings, there is perception. Yang sanjanati tang vitakketi. What one perceives, one thinks about. Yang vitakketi tang papancheti. What one thinks about, tang papancheti. How do you say it? What one thinks about, one gets distracted by that. That is called papancha. That is not anymore one's own control. Yang papancheti, when one gets distracted by that, tato nidanam, based on that, purisang papancha sanya sanka samuda charanti atitanagata pachuppannesu chakku vinyayesu rupesu. Based on that, due to being affected by this papancha, one loses one's own thinking, own control of the thought. One becomes the victim of this process of thought, and then he indulges into the ideas with regard to I and form in terms of atita, anagata, pachuppanna, past, present, and future. Okay, so if you look at this formula carefully, you would find that until the arising of Vedana, it is explained to be simply a process. Now there are a lot of discussions on this, particularly right now I can remember an article written by Professor Lily de Silva. Yes, Professor Lily de Silva on the difference between I don't remember the exact title, but it discusses on the perception of Arahant and the perception of common people. Because when somebody becomes an Arahant, when he is still living, he has to make use of his indriyas, right? He has to deal with daily activities. But then what is the difference between his perception and the perception of common people? What is the difference between his feelings and the feelings of a common person? I think that was the discussion present there. So now, if you look at this formula, you would find that until Vedana, this is explained to be a process. And immediately after that, the tone changes. It says, Yang Vedeti Tang Sanjanati. So there is this idea of self. What one feels, one perceives. Before that, there is still, it is just a process, and it in that explanation of Lily de Silva, for example, you would find that she is saying that this, until this, the process is same between a common person and an arahant. But immediately after Vedana, a common being personalizes his or her feelings. That is how he gets into all these, papancha, all these different types of papancha. And then finally, he becomes the victim of the process. He has to go through these uncontrollable thoughts, cannot control the anger or, lust, cannot decide what to do. One is very much deluded. So that means one is not in control of one's own thoughts anymore. It becomes a passive victim of the process, unknowingly most of the time. So this is the process that is found in this sutta, perceptual process. This is in chart. Chart is derived from this explanation. But when one have this understanding of three characteristics of existence, that is anicca, dukkha, and anatta, with regard to the five aggregates, then one would not accept any of the aggregates as self, right? So what it says is that sabbe sankara anicchati, sabbe sankara dukkhati, sabbe dhamma anattati. All the conditioned things are impermanent. All conditioned things produce suffering. All dhammas are without self. When one understands it rightly, then he becomes free from the idea of self. He does not identify his perceptual process or whatever as I see, I understand, I like, I do not like. And thus he becomes free from the process. Therefore, whatever there be of rupa, vedana, sanya, sankara, vijnana, of the past, present, or future, one's own or external, gross or subtle, lofty or low, far or near, one should understand according to reality and true wisdom. This does not belong to me. This am I not. This is not myself. Whoso delights in any of the five aggregates, he delights in suffering. And whoso delights in suffering will not be free from suffering. So that is the idea of this dukkha. When you talk about dukkha, when you especially try to understand the definition of dukkha, the last sentence, Sankitena Panchupadana Kanda Dukkha. It is because of clinging to 5 aggregates that there is suffering. When one truly understands these 5 aggregates in terms of anicca, dukkha, and anatta, there is no clinging, and thus one becomes free from suffering. So there is this little information about samsara, how samsara is defined in Buddhism. Samsara is understood to be beginningless, inconceivable. So there is no discussion of the beginning of samsara. Since when we have been wandering in this samsara, is not particularly explained. What is said again and again is that you know that you are in samsara, you are suffering. When you are aware of that, why not take a step forward so that you can be free from that? Why not follow the Dhamma? When you are aware of your suffering existence in this samsara. Now, craving is the second truth, right? So there are 3 types of craving that are mentioned. Kama tanha, bhava tanha, vibhava tanha. And it is because of tanha that dukkha comes to be. Kama tanha refers to the desire for the enjoyment of the 5 sense objects. Bhava tanha, desire for continued or eternal life. It is closely connected with the so-called eternity belief, bhava ditti or sassata ditti, the belief in an absolute, eternal ego entity persisting independently of our body. Vibhava tanha, on the other hand, represent desire for extinction, belief in annihilation. That is vibhava ditti or uchcheda ditti, the delusive, materialistic notion of a more or less real ego which is annihilated at death. Kama tanha is very clear when one is engaged in sensual pleasure. But bhava tanha and vibhava tanha represent 2 extreme views. One is sassata ditti, the other is uchcheda ditti. Uchcheda ditti is again connected to kama tanha. So bhava tanha is understood to be having the idea that one is going to exist in different lifetimes. Having this body and mind, when one moves to another existence, he or she only leaves the body. Mental aspect continues, right? So this is based on the idea that body and mind are different, are separated. The idea is expressed in terms of anyang jivang, anyang sarira. On the other hand, vibhava tanha says that so jivang, so sarira. Body and the mind are same. You have this one lifetime. At death, together with body, self or consciousness or whatever it is, that perishes. Now, in the word of Professor Karunadasa, for example, he would always say that bhava tanha correspond to metaphysical self, whereas vibhava tanha correspond to physical self. But still, both the ideas are connected to the existence of self, and therefore should be avoided. From the Buddhist perspective, there is no self, right? So these three tanhas, kama tanha, which, as I said, is connected to vibhava tanha, because in the vibhava tanha, there is this idea of body and mind or self to be one, and you have this one lifetime, so you are fully engaged in sensual pleasure because you do not believe in the next life, therefore you do not have any kind of karmic accountability and so on. Whereas bhava tanha is different. But these three types of tanha contribute to the origin of suffering. What is the source of craving? Where does this craving arise and take root? Wherever in the world there are delightful and pleasurable things, there this craving arises and takes root. If whenever perceiving a visual object, a sound, odor, taste, bodily impression, or a mind object, the object is pleasant, one is attracted, and if unpleasant, one is repelled. This tanha leads to upadana, to bhava, to jati, jara marana, dukkha, domanassa, upayasa. So this is explained in terms of having different types of feelings. Based on one's feelings, one then gets attached to the feelings, pleasurable feelings, not pleasurable feelings, and then from there one gets stuck in the process. You'd find some other explanations of how tanha contributes to different forms of evil actions. There are different suttas like Sakapaiha Sutta, where there is explanation of how because of craving and desire, people get into so much trouble in daily life. So it says, truly, due to sensuous craving, conditioned through sensuous craving, impelled by sensuous craving, entirely moved by sensuous craving, kings fight with kings, princes with princes, priests with priests, citizens with citizens. The mother quarrels with the son with the mother, the father with the son with the father, brother quarrels with brother, brother with sister, sister with brother, friend with friend, everyone, everybody. Okay. Particularly kama tanha is emphasized here. When somebody is fully overcome by kama tanha, the severity of having kama tanha. These are some further explanations. I think you are familiar with the idea of kamma. When you talk about dukkha, which is caused by tanha, because based on different types of tanha, you carry out different forms of actions, kamma. And whatever kamma you perform, it has got effects on your life, on the life of people around you or other beings around you, on the environment in general. Yeah, so it says, kamma sakum hi kamma dayado, kamma yoni, kamma bandhu, kamma patisaranu, yang kammang karissami, kalyanang va papakang va tassa dayado bhavissamiti. This is a reflection of someone who accepts the teaching of the Buddha, specifically the monks. So you can find this being mentioned in a sutta where monks in their daily practice, they recite that I am my own karma. I am a heir to my karma. I am born in this life from my karma. I am the kinsman of my karma. I am protected by my karma. Whatever karmas I shall do, good or bad, I shall become their heir. You mean Sami? Sami means Lord. Yeah, interesting name. Yeah, so yeah. Now these karmas, whatever karmas people perform, be it good or bad, one should be, should experience the result. And these results, this vipaka, can ripe in the present life, in the next life, or in the life after next. So depending on the nature of karma, depending on the severity of karma that you perform, you are going to get result. There is a verse you can find in the Dhammapada, Nantalike na samuntamaje, right? Na pabbatanam. What is the other part? I forgot it. So what it says is that na antalike. What?
Vivarang Pavissa.
Varang pavissa, yeah. So Antalika means sky. Samudra is ocean. Na antalike na samudra majje na pabbatanang vibarang pavissa. Pabbata means mountain. Vibara, cave. So it says that when you perform a particular action, in this case it is referring to akusala kamma, you cannot hide from the result of it, vipaka of it. If you try to escape from this vipaka, going into the sky, in deep ocean, on a mountain, in a cave, nowhere you can hide from the result of vipaka of the karma that you perform. So your happiness and your suffering is in your hand. This gives you liberty, right? And this makes you socially a responsible person in a society, because whatever we do, we think, we speak, everything has its impact on ourselves, on the society. That is the idea, basically. Then you have this third truth, that is, of course, understanding these three universal characteristics of existence, which would contribute to the eradication of craving and which would lead you to experience happiness. Okay. Yeah, so I think more or less we have covered these explanations. These arahants are people who are freed from all this. Therefore, they are arahants and they behave in a way, not being attached to their five aggregates and so on, because they are freed from this negative psychological qualities, akusala mula, akusala dhamma, akusala kamma, right? Basically, an arahant is defined in terms of someone who is freed from lobha, dosa, moha. So lobha kayo, dosa kayo, moha kayoti, nibbana. So it is the experience of nibbana, bliss. But how do you overcome this craving or different causes that lead to suffering? Now you have this fourth truth, that is the path. Yeah, I think you are familiar with this already. When the Buddha presented his middle teaching, middle way, the Noble Eightfold Path, he asked his students to be free from these two extremes. One is engagement in sensual pleasure because it is base, vulgar, common, ignoble, and unprofitable. So these are the qualifications attached to this kind of practice. And the second is extreme self-affliction or asceticism, which is painful, ignoble, and unprofitable. Now, if you look carefully, the second type of practice, which is extreme asceticism, it is not explained as base, vulgar, and common, right? But it is explained in terms of painful, ignoble, and unprofitable. So those people who have been carrying out extreme ascetic practices, even though the Buddha says that probably that is not going to lead you to awakening, but it is not as bad as being engaged in sensual pleasure, because these people who are engaged in extreme ascetic practices, they are morally conscious beings. And then you have this Noble Eightfold Path. This is a very popular teaching. Most of you are familiar with this Noble Eightfold Path. Many good books written on this. There is one that is written by Bhikkhu Bodhi. I think it is available online. You can look at it. He provides very good explanation of this Noble Eightfold Path. But later on in other suttas, we come to know that this Eightfold Path is extended to Tenfold Path, right? That is the name of the book is Four Noble Truths, I guess. I think that is the name. Four Noble Truths by Bhikkhu Bodhi. Four Noble Truths? No, I think Noble Eightfold Path. Okay, I will look into it and send the name. I will try to find out. There are a few more. Oh, there is another one that is, I think it is called Word of the Buddha. It is by Venerable Yana Tiloka. That is also a very good book. Small, but very good. You have all this important information in this book. Okay, so I think it is almost time for the break. After coming back from the break, we will go through this Noble Eightfold Path very quickly, and hopefully I'll try to include the Tenfold Path in the discussion. And if we can finish the discussion quickly, we will move on to our next topic of discussion as well. Okay, you can take a break now. I think the other book is Word. Right. Here. Yes. Okay, then. See you after the break. Okay. So I think we can resume our class, but before starting the discussion of Noble Eightfold Path, this was the book that I was referring to. You can find the PDF copy here. This is the book by Bhikkhu Bodhi. The other one is the Word of the Buddha. This one by Bhikkhu Yana Tiloka. These two books would be useful to have a fundamental understanding of the Four Noble Truths and Noble Eightfold Path, particularly. But also to have an understanding of even Tilakkhana and so on. Any questions so far? Okay. Okay, then I think we can begin our class. Let me share my screen again. Yeah, so we have been discussing about the fourth noble truth that provides a discussion of Noble Eightfold Path, that is defined as a Majjhima Patipada, middle path in relation to the two extremes, Kamesu Kallikanu Yoga and Attakilamatanu Yoga. Yeah. Now, this is the characteristic of this path that is mentioned in the sutta. Avoiding both these extremes, the middle way realized by the Tathagata, producing vision, producing knowledge, leads to calm, to direct knowledge, to self-awakening, unbinding. Yes. So this is the characteristics of this particular path. If it is followed sincerely, if it is taken up and followed sincerely, one should have this understanding of nature as it is. So the expression that we should be familiar with is Yatha Bhuta Jnana Dassana. Knowledge and vision of things as they are. Okay, rather than being affected by papancha sanya sankha. Papancha sanya sankha. Earlier, I could not remember the English phrase for this papancha and papancha sanya sanka is translated in English as conceptual proliferation. Conceptual proliferation. I was referring to it as a thought process in which one is lost. Okay, one loses control over his or her own thoughts. That is called papancha sanya sanka. Being fully overcome by the thought process. That is conceptual proliferation. But if one is sufficiently taking up this practice and carrying out this practice, one would be able to overcome this papancha sanya sanka, and one would be able to walk on the right path and get an understanding of reality as it is. Now this is the path. The middle path consists of 8 factors. Samma ditti, samma sankappa, samma vacha, samma kammanta, samma ajiva, samma vayama, samma sati, samma samadhi. And these 8 path factors are classified into 3 groups as panya, sila, samadhi. Now, if you are familiar with these 3 categories of training, they are called threefold training. Tesosikka. Normally, the presentation is that you have sila, and then samadhi, and then panya, right? And the relationship between the sila, samadhi, and panya is that sila helps you gain samadhi, and samadhi helps you gain wisdom. So that is the presentation normally that you can find. But if you look at this Noble Eightfold Path, you would see that the first 2 factors are grouped under panya, next 3 factors under sila category, and then the last 3 factors under samadhi category, right? And then, as I said, there is a list of 10 path factors. Okay, so 10-fold path, where you have 2 more extra. The 9th one is sammayana, and the 10th one is samma vimutti. So it seems like this Noble Eightfold Path actually leads to the attainment of sammayana and samma vimutti. Samma vimutti is the final stage of the path. That could be regarded as a fruition of the path. Vimutti means liberation, whereas sammayana means complete and proper understanding. Now that is different from sammaditi. So what it means is that at the beginning of taking up a path, one has to be necessarily aware of one's goal, and one has to be aware of the path. One has to know why one is going to take up this path. So I'm not sure, I think I have mentioned it earlier also. If you look at the suttas, you would see that on a certain occasion, on a certain place, in a certain place, the Buddha gives a talk, a teaching. A number of people come to listen to the talk. Not everyone accepts the teaching of the Buddha, right? Those people who are convinced by the teaching, they come forward, and then some of them want to join the order, and some of them want to remain as lay followers, right? So what is happening is that in the beginning, you have to have a kind of correct understanding of the teaching. Once you have this understanding and then you are motivated by that, you are determined to follow the path, then only you take up the practice. Now, if we go through one by one, what is right understanding? How it is defined? Right understanding is defined in terms of having an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So you have to know that suffering exists. I suffer, you know. I have this experience of suffering, sorrow, lamentation. And you have to know that these sufferings are not without cause. And there is a way out of this suffering. Right? And you have to follow the path. It also refers to an understanding of 5 aggregates in terms of their 3 common characteristics. So you did not yet realize the anicca, dukkha, and anatta of the 5 aggregates. But you have an understanding that these 5 aggregates that I refer to me, myself, they are not permanent. And I am experiencing suffering, that is truth, right? And then whether there is a self within me or not, I am not sure about it yet. But I am convinced that there cannot be a self for various reasons, right? Based on the teachings. And then you have to have an understanding of what is wholesome and what is unwholesome karma and their roots. Akusala mula, kusala mula. Akusala kamma, kusala kamma. If you are not in a position to distinguish between unwholesome and wholesome, you are not going to be able to abandon the unwholesome ones and develop the wholesome ones, right? Now these are listed as akusala kamma. So their roots are lobha, dosa, and moha. Destruction of living beings is karmically unwholesome. Stealing, unlawful sexual intercourse, lying, tale-bearing, harsh language, frivolous talk, covetousness, ill will, wrong views. First 3 come under kaya kamma. Physically you perform the karma. Whereas number 4 to 7, these 4 come under vachi kamma, verbal action. Unwholesome actions committed by words or speech. Last 3 are thoughts. Okay, thoughts of covetousness, ill will, and wrong views. So these are regarded as 10 unwholesome karma, and their roots are greed, hatred, and delusion or confusion. Their opposite is this 10 kusala karma. That is exactly opposite to this 10 akusala karma. So the akusala karma, the first one says destruction of living beings or harming any living beings. Whereas the first kusala karma is abstaining from killing or harming. Second is abstaining from stealing. Third is abstaining from unlawful sexual intercourse. Fourth is abstaining from lying. Fifth is abstaining from tale-bearing. Sixth is abstaining from harsh language. Seventh is abstaining from frivolous talk. Eighth is absence of covetousness. Ninth is absence of ill will. And 10th is right understanding. Exactly the opposite. And their roots is alobha, adosa, amoha. Absence of lobha, absence of raga. Right? So absence of raga means presence of generosity, presence of kindness, right? So when you do not kill or do not harm, you do not just remain passively without harming any beings. Rather, you have this understanding of caring beings, caring other beings, right? Adosa refers to developing loving kindness, metta and karuna, right? You do not become hateful, rather you develop the characteristics of loving kindness, the quality of loving kindness, friendliness. Amoha, absence of moha means presence of knowledge, presence of wisdom, right? So these are the kusala mula, three kusala mula. What is right thought? How it is defined? Right thought is defined in three ways. It could be understood in terms of nekkamma, nekkamma sankappa, thoughts free from lust. Avyapada sankappa, thoughts free from ill will. Avihimsa sankappa, thoughts free from cruelty. So at this point, you are not established, you are not fully realized or established in these factors or in these thoughts. These are your determination. You make up your minds. That is the meaning of sankappa. You decide to follow a particular path, which is wholesome one. And after that, you take up your true action, right speech. You avoid being engaged in these four types of wrong speeches. And you can find them being mentioned here, 4 to 7th. These four types of wrong speech. Musavada, Visunavacha, Harusavacha, Sampappala. Then you take up right actions, the three types of actions that you carry out by body. Abstention from killing, from stealing, from unlawful sexual intercourse. Then you have this practice of right livelihood. So particularly right livelihood is defined in terms of avoiding these 5 types of business, right? But there is further elaboration on this. Earlier I mentioned of this sutta called Samanyapala Sutta, and there are many other suttas. Particularly in this sutta, you would find Sila section is presented, in a very detailed manner. You have Chula Sila, Majjhima Sila, Mahasila. Especially under the category of Majjhima Sila and Mahasila, you would find every specific details about how a monastic member especially, but also a practitioner who take up the Buddhist path of practice should carry out their way of life. How one should be engaged in the practice, how one should collect one's own foods and everything, how one should not, follow different ways of gathering foods and everything. Among the practices, among the especially, how do you say, in terms of collecting foods and so on, among the practices that are prohibited, for example, includes reading palms, or foretelling the future, and all these things are mentioned there, apart from just this type of business. So in a way, this shows that there are some questions, for example, with regard to this explanation of right livelihood. Now, when we recall that the Buddha is giving this sutta for the first time, this teaching to the 5 monks, right? And they are ascetics. So we expect that they are not engaged in any of this kind of activities, right? But then who this particular Samma Ajiva, this factor is directed to. So this tells us that this Noble Eightfold Path as a path of practice, and particularly this right livelihood, is directed to everyone, you know, including the lay community and everyone, not just the monastic members, or not just those who took up the path of practice. Because ideally, when somebody joins the order, one has to leave all kinds of business, right? And after that, you have Samma Virya, right effort. The effort to avoid unarisen, unwholesome thoughts to arise, the effort to overcome arisen, unwholesome thoughts, the effort to develop unarisen, wholesome thoughts, and the effort to maintain arisen, wholesome thoughts. So these 4 ways the right effort is defined. Whatever unwholesome thoughts that did not arise yet, you make effort so that they don't arise. Whatever unwholesome thoughts that have arisen, you make effort to overcome them. Whatever wholesome thoughts that have not been arisen yet, you make effort to give rise to them. And whatever wholesome thoughts that have arisen, you make effort to maintain them. The 7th factor is right mindfulness, and I think you are also familiar with this. The definition of right mindfulness, sati is a very popular term everywhere, and satipatthana practice. So this is associated with kayanupassana, vedananupassana, chittanupassana, and dhammanupassana. 4 ways of practicing mindfulness. So they are called 4 foundations of mindfulness. Contemplating body as body, feelings as feelings, mental states as mental states, mental objects as mental objects. But one has to have this attitude when one is being engaged in the practice. One has to be resolute, aware and mindful, having put aside worldly desire and sadness. This is called right mindfulness. Okay, it is not like, okay, let's practice right mindfulness now. So the idea is that if you are determined based on your understanding of the teaching, when you decide to really follow the path, you make up your mind. You have to meet a teacher. You have to have sufficient guidance. The general instruction provided by the Buddha is that when somebody comes to the Buddha, he gives them teaching, instruction and everything, and then he asks them to find a suitable place, rukkamule sunyagare, right? Particularly under a tree or in an empty place in a jungle where there is no disturbance, no distractions. Buddha asks the individual to find a suitable place to carry out the practice. This is one thing that we have to keep in mind. The other is that how do you test if you are progressing in your path? Then the suggestion is that, of course, you have to be self-aware of your own practice and so on. You can test your development of your practice when you come out in the society, when you meet people. How do you interact with them? This is a real test. when you are in the society, as a member of the society, functioning in a society. So before having this kind of training from a particular teacher or particular center or particular place, if one suddenly decides to practice all by himself or herself, I'm not sure if it is going to be as effective as, you know, if as you are getting the training from a particular teacher and center. And this is right concentration, samma samadhi. So it is defined in terms of chittasa ekagata, one pointedness of mind. Accompanied by wholesome consciousness, kusala chitta. The other part is not included here. Samadhi is defined in terms of 4 jhanas, attainment of 4 jhanas. So if you look at the classification of 8 factors, you would find the last 3, namely Samma Viriya, Samma Sati, and Samma Samadhi come under the category Samadhi. So what it means that you have to make effort first, right? So you have to have this effort. You have to be established in mindfulness. Then only you can develop proper concentration. In a way, making effort and being established in mindfulness represent different layers of concentration until you reach to the deeper layer of concentration, deeper level of concentration. At that point, this concentration, right, samma samadhi, right, concentration is defined in terms of achieving 4 jhanas: Patama jhana, Dutiya jhana, Tatiya jhana, and Chatutta jhana. And if you look at the description of these jhanas, you would find that they are accompanied by some wholesome mental factors. Vitakka vichara, piti sukha, ekagata. So you have vitakka, vichara. So vitakka is the word for vitakka is I don't think it is possible just by studying to attain jhana. However, there is how do you say? There are incidents of people who have been listening to the discussions of particular teachings from the Buddha or his enlightened disciples, and while listening to these talks, they are achieving certain stages. So they are fully pariyatti jhana, probably, yeah. So they are fully engaged in the teaching, and therefore they can achieve that level of concentration. Also, one thing we have to keep in mind that 2,500 years back, the society was different. I think now we have so many distractions. So you really have to find a suitable place away from all these distractions. And of course, a constant practice is necessary. So vitakka refers to thoughts, vichara, continuation of the thought, yeah, and then piti is happiness, sukha, a different level of bliss, and then ekagata, one-pointedness of mind. Those are the characteristics of first jhana. Then when you reach to the second jhana, vitakka, vichara are not present there. Piti, sukha, ekagata. In the third jhana, you do not have piti, you have sukha and ekagata. In the fourth jhana, it is just ekaggata. So this provides an understanding of how concentration can be, deeper and deeper, right? Now, let us look at these two passages that I have included from the Mahachattarisaka Sutta. Now, these two passages are interesting, as I was talking about. Firstly, having a right understanding, right view, or being convinced by the teaching. That is one factor that we need to keep in mind. The other is, I was talking about 10 factors, tenfold path. But one interesting factor that is one interesting matter that is present here is the definition of Samma Samadhi. So we look at these two now. Let us read the first passage first. Tatra bhikkave sammaditthi pubbangama hoti. Katancha bhikkave sammaditthi pubbangama hoti. Micchaditting micchaditti iti pajanati. Sammaditting sammaditthi iti pajanati. Sassa hoti sammaditthi. Now here, this you can find in the Mahachattarisaka Sutta, where you have this discussion of tenfold path. So not just 8 path factor, you have 2 more, Sammayana and Sammavimutti, right? But it begins with Sammaditthi. And now here the discussion is Sammaditthi should be understood as a first factor, leading factor. Okay, it leads one to right direction, and it functions as a kind of how do you say, factor that checks on other factors, even on this first path factor. What is the function of this Sammaditthi? It says, how does it function as a leading factor? It gives you the idea what is wrong view, wrong ditti, miccha ditti, and what is right view. You have a sense of understanding between the right and wrong. You are in a position to decide, and then you take up Sammaditthi as your practice, and you avoid wrong view, right? That is how you come to know that this is Sammaditthi, this is the right view. You are fully sure about it. And not just with regard to the Sammaditthi, deciding what is Sammaditthi, that you have to have Sammaditthi. So there's a discussion of 2 Sammaditthis here. Okay, Sammaditthi functioning as a leading factor to understand what is Sammaditthi, and then the rest of the path factors. Sammaditthi is present in Samma Sankappa, for example, to be able to understand what is Miccha Sankappa and what is Samma Sankappa. And after that, you take up Samma Sankappa and avoid Miccha Sankappa throughout the path, right? Until you come to Samma Samadhi. Now, how Samma Samadhi is defined? Look at this definition here. Katamocha bhikkave aryo Samma Samadhi saupaniso saparikkaro sayyatidam sammaditthi samma sankappo samma vacha samma kammantu samma ajivo samma vayamo samma sati yako bhikkave imehi sattaha angehi chittassa ekaggata parikkata ayang uccati bhikkave aryo samma samadhi saupaniso itipi saparikkaro itipi. Now, the question here is how you are supposed to understand Samma Samadhi together with all its factors, contributory factors. So when talking about Samma Samadhi, it says that it should be understood together with the previous 7 path factors. One way of saying is that Samma Samadhi means the other 7 path factors. This shows how all these 8 path factors are closely interrelated. One is not without the others. So there are discussions with regard to the nature of this path of practice, how one is supposed to follow this path. Should one follow successively one after the other, or is it that the entire path should be taken together, to be practiced together? Is it a cumulative practice or successive practice? So there are different opinions with regard to this, but the ones that I find convincing and I think good expositions of this path, middle path, is that some of the people, they say that in the beginning you have to have a kind of progressive understanding of these path factors, but in the end, when you are really fully engaged in the practice, it becomes a cumulative path. That means whatever practice you carry out, all the other factors are present. Probably in terms of intensity, you focus on a particular path factor, but at the same time, all the other path factors are mentioned in each of them. And it should be clear by looking at this picture. This is how each path factor is defined. Yeah, so right view is the remaining 7 path factors. Right intention, accordingly the same, each path factor. Yeah. So it all comes down to this summary of the teaching. You would find this in the Dhammapada. Sabba papasa akaranang kusalasa upasampada sachitta pariyodapanang etang buddhana sasana. This is a very popular verse from the Dhammapada. You would very often hear this verse being uttered in different monasteries, different occasions, in Theravadin countries especially. What it means is that not doing of all evil, performing of wholesomeness, sachitta pariyodapanam, purifying one's own mind, etang buddhana sasana. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. So in brief, this is the central teaching of the Buddha from the practical perspective, that one should make all effort to avoid all kinds of evil, unwholesome, unskillful actions and thoughts. One should make effort to develop wholesome ones. One should make all effort to purify one's mind. So that is the central message that you can find in the teaching of the Buddha. With this, we end our discussion on this topic of the teaching of the Buddha. Any questions so far? I'm not sure if all of you are hearing my lecture. I hope there was no disturbance of audio, the voice and so on after changing the line.
Actually, this topic we have done in the Professor Kapila class already yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why.
So any question? Okay, so I hope you all received my email. I sent you a document.
Yes, teacher.
Yeah, so that is.
I have already.
Yeah, that is focusing on how the Buddha carried out his teaching career by establishing the Sangha. So that would be our next topic of discussion, how the Sanghas were formed and how these different Sanghas, different communities, Buddhist communities have contributed to the preservation and spreading and transmission of the teaching of the Buddha. So in the document that I sent to you, you can go through the document, then you would have, a discussion of Buddha's early career. That is from the text Mahavagga of the Vinaya Pitaka. That is volume 1. Okay, so basically what you would find is that yeah. Yeah. In the Buddhist tradition, normally all are welcome. So that was one point that is mentioned in text. But of course, there are some specific procedures that you have to go through if you want to be ordained as a Buddhist monk. Normally in the beginning, you have to approach a particular monastery. You have to talk to the monks in the monastery. Then you have to, if you are allowed to join, you will be given a certain, training at the beginning. You have to probably be familiar with a certain teaching and suttas, because, if you are talking about becoming a bhikkhu, it requires a upasampada. Whereas if you want to join as a novice monk, that is samanera, that is a different thing. No, in IBC, there is no ordination ceremony so far. If somebody wish to become a monk, he has to find a temple. But there are some temples around IBC, so it should be okay. I think if somebody is really willing to join in the monastic order. Yeah, this is something to discuss, because in the beginning, when the Buddha started his career as a teacher, he did not, establish this the whole process of how to give Upasampada at the beginning. It came much later, so it developed later. The methods and procedure was developed later when the Sangha was becoming, bigger and bigger. A lot of people want to join the order, so there was particular procedure that was mentioned. Yes. Okay, so let me ask you.
Teacher?
Yeah.
What exactly is Upasampada?
Upasampada means when somebody wishes to become a monk, a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni. So one has to go through this ceremony called Upasampada Ceremony. So that normally takes place in a boundary hall. It's called Sima, a specific place designed in temples to hold Uposatha. Uposatha means disciplinary acts for the monastic members. So in this particular hall, time to time, twice a month, monks gather together, recite Patimukkas or different rules, discuss the disciplinary matters. So this is the hall. And when somebody wants to get Upasampada, somebody wants to become a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni, this is the place where this Upasampada ceremony takes place. But before that, one has to, have a certain training beforehand, of learning the Dhamma, memorizing certain suttas, working on one's own behavior, because there are different rules. For example, how you should walk, how you should eat, how you should, do everything in daily life. So all these teachings are there. So Upasampada is when you become a bhikkhu or bhikkhuni. Yeah, Sekya rules. They are called Sekya rules. For the novice monks, normally there are 75 Sekya rules. They are also included in the Patimukka. Okay, so I wanted to ask you if you have chosen your topic to write essays. Those following MA program have to write 2 essays, right?
When do we have to submit the first one?
Whenever you finish writing it. So,
but is there any last date?
I would expect that you finish your first essay, which is a very short essay, before your 8th or 9th lecture. Before that,
Okay.
That is basically in the middle of the semester, because for the BA students, for example, they are going to have midterm test, right? So if you can submit your essay by that time, it would be good for me, for you, because then you can focus on writing your longer essays.
Okay. Thank you.
How many words should be included? How many words are mentioned in the course outline? 1,500, right? Yeah.
Yes, teacher, 1,500.
Where is it? 500, right? And the other one is 2,500 to 3,000, right? So if you are writing 1,500 words, that would be, I think, around 3 pages in MS Word, I guess. Assignment, yes, assignment. Of course, yes. You can choose a topic, but it has to be related to our course, okay? Not any topic related to our course.
Hello, sir.
For BA students, you do not have to write 2 essays. You just have to write 1 essay, but I think you are going to face midterm test. So I have to discuss with people in the office to find out how we can conduct this. Yeah. Anyone saying anything? Okay. Can you suggest any topic? Yes, you can. So far we have covered some topics, and you can choose from that. Also, I have provided a list of tentative, topics of discussion for this course. So it could be like if you want to focus on the socio-philosophical condition in the time of the Buddha, You can take that. If you are interested, you can discuss about this Vedic culture and tradition. If you are interested, you can discuss about Upanishadic literature as well. If you would like to write, you can write on 6 samanas, or you can focus on any of the samana. Any of the samana. And in the topics of discussion, in the course outline that I have provided to you, there are different topics. You can focus on any of the topic. If you would like to discuss on different Sangiti, for example, councils, or you can also focus on, on the preservation and transmission of Buddhist literature, or different councils. Somebody can focus on Asoka's contribution in the propagation of Buddhism in India, right? Those interested in Mahayana Buddhism, or Madhyamika, Yogacara, Vajrayana schools of thoughts, you can choose topics related to that. But my suggestion is that you should focus on the early Madhyamika and Yogacara, that is particularly arose and developed within India. Okay, I mean Greater India. There are other topics you can take up to write your essays. You can focus on any of the great Buddhist personalities. For example, someone can write on the life and work of Moggaliputta Tissathera, who was the president of the Third Council, who composed this Kathavattupakarana, one of the Abhidhamma texts. Someone can write on the life of Mahinda Thera, the son of King Ashoka. Someone can write on the life of Buddhaghosa, Acharya Buddhaghosa, a great commentator, even though he came much later. Or even the life of Nagarjuna or Vasubandhu, Asanga, all these great people. Anything else?
Teacher, you did some of the suttas in one of the classes, and so can we do something? Can we write about some sutta, 1 or 2 suttas or something?
Yeah, you can do that as well, because teaching is one part of our course, right? So I have been mentioning different teachings, so I think you can focus on that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Someone can also focus on this few suttas that deal with, Buddha's views and explanation with regard to caste system in that time. You can go through these suttas and probably you can organize in different points, different topics, and present your ideas or your understanding. More messages. What is the deadline for the assignment? Yeah, so the short one, it would be good if you can submit in the middle of the semester. That means 8th or 9th week would be okay. Then Do we have to present our essays? The last one you have to present. So we will have, yeah, we have to make an arrangement for your presentations as well. So if everything is good, internet and everything, I think it could be in one of the classes we can organize. We can have all these presentations, or we have to find other ways. So any other question or remark from anyone? What about, who is this? Galaxy J7 wants to say anything? Or probably Kinzang wants to say something?
No, teacher.
Okay. What about Venerable Huale? No? Maybe Venerable Hong
Thank you,
Yuan?
teacher. Yeah. Thank you, teacher. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah.
No? Okay, then if there is no no question or no remarks, we can end our today's lecture. Assignment, topic, name and presentation. Topic, name are the same. Yes, it could be same. Your essay topic, presentation topic, because you will be presenting on the topic on which you are writing your essay, right? So there will be okay. It should not be two different topics. Okay, then see you next week. Thank you everyone for joining. Bye bye.
Thank you, teacher. See you next week.
Okay.